Coronavirus, 97,000 children tested positive for coronavirus in the last 2 weeks in July, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Does that give you any pause about schools reopening for in-person learning?
Because they may have, as you would call it, a case. It may be a case, but it's also a case where there's a tiny fraction of death, tiny fraction, and they get better very quickly. Yeah, they may have it for a short period of time, but as you know, the seriousness of it in terms of what it leads to is extraordinarily small, very, very much less than 1%.
So do you still believe that children are essentially immune?
Yeah, I think that for the most part they do very well. I mean, they don't get very sick. They don't catch it easily. They don't get very sick. And according to the people that I've spoken to, they don't transport it or transfer it to other people, or certainly not very easily. So, yeah, I think schools have to open. We want to get our economy going. We have incredible numbers despite this. If we could get this going, I think it's a very important thing for the economy to get the schools going.
As public schools grapple with the challenge of reopening during a pandemic, public education advocates are criticizing Education Secretary Betsey DeVos for remaining largely absent from key decisions while working remotely from her Michigan waterfront estate with round-the-clock security detail paid for by taxpayers. With more on her reporting, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Heidi Przybyla. Also with us, Morning Joe Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Dave Campbell, who will debunk some of the things that the president just said right there. But Heidi, we'll begin with you on your reporting. What did you find?
Even as DeVos is following Trump and demanding that schools reopen, Mika, she has a public schedule that has been empty for weeks, according to NBC's review of her schedule. She's not touring those public schools that she's demanding reopen, even though we know many of them have poor ventilation systems, which has been a concern, for instance, in other public buildings like restaurants for spread. She's not raising any funding alarms about the severe shortages in funding that public schools say that they are facing. And then last week, she declined to testify before Congress on a hearing specifically on school reopening. So I reached out to her office and asked where she's been, what she's been doing. They say she's been in constant contact with officials and superintendents. However, when NBC reached the Public School Superintendents Association, Mika, that represents superintendents in all 49 states, they said that they have not heard from her all year. This is all the more notable because she does have this round-the-clock armed security detail, which in theory could take her anywhere that she wants to go, Mika. And NBC first reported on this back in 2018 on the amount of money that this is costing taxpayers. We checked back in with the U.S. Marshals Service. That tab now is $25 million and counting. Of course, Betsey DeVos is a billionaire heiress who has been at a couple of her mansions in Michigan, and this is all now coming to a head with public school advocates targeting her in Michigan with a mobile billboard that should be arriving just about now into Grand Rapids, the area where she has her primary residence and her summer estate. And on that billboard, they are imploring her to, quote, stop hiding in your mansion. Mika?
Heidi, thanks. Moving to